A woman's voice cut through the cabin like a blade. "This is first class for a reason. Some people should know where they belong." Marcus Webb didn't move. His calloused hands that had gripped the throttle of an F-18 at Mach 1.8, stayed perfectly still on his son's small fingers. But 8-year-old Jalen heard every word. His grip tightened on the worn model jet his dying mother had given him. 2 hours later, that same woman would be screaming, begging, praying, as the captain's desperate voice echoed through the shaking cabin. "Are there any fighter pilots on board?" And the janitor in seat 28A would stand up. "What happened next will change how you see every stranger you've ever judged. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're going to want to stay for this one." The boarding process at Newark Liberty International was chaos. Marcus Webb stood in line, his son's hand locked in his, watching the first-class passengers glide past the velvet rope into the jetway. Their luggage was leather. Their shoes were polished. Their faces held that particular expression of people who had never waited for anything in their lives. Marcus had been awake for 19 hours. His night shift at Morrison and Hayes Financial. Mopping floors, emptying trash cans, scrubbing toilets executives used but never acknowledged, had ended at 6 a.m. He'd taken 2 buses home, showered in 4 minutes, packed Jalen's medications into a carry-on bag, and caught the airport shuttle by 7:30. Now it was nearly noon, and his bones ached with a tiredness that coffee couldn't touch. "Dad." Jalen tugged his hand. "Are we almost there?" Marcus looked down at his son. 8 years old, 62 pounds. A scar on his chest from the first surgery hidden beneath a faded Captain America t-shirt 2 sizes too big. "Almost, buddy. Just a few more minutes. My legs are tired." "I know. Mine too." The line shuffled forward. Marcus adjusted the strap of Jalen's worn backpack on his own shoulder, feeling the weight of the small model F-18 inside the last gift Elena had given their son before the cancer took her. "Give this to him when he's old enough to understand." She had whispered, her voice paper-thin in that hospital room. "Tell him his daddy used to fly. Tell him his daddy touched the sky." Marcus hadn't told him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some things were too heavy to explain to a child who had already lost his mother. Next, sir, you're holding up the line." Marcus blinked. The gate agent was staring at him with barely concealed impatience, her manicured fingers tapping the counter. "Sorry." He handed over their boarding passes. Seats 28A and 28B. She scanned them without looking up. "You're in economy. Board with Group 5. Step aside, please." "When is Group 5? "After Groups 1 through 4, obviously." Marcus nodded and guided Jalen toward the waiting area. He didn't argue. He had stopped arguing with the world a long time ago. They found 2 empty seats near the window. Jalen climbed up and pressed his face to the glass, watching the ground crew load luggage onto the 737. "Dad, look. That's our plane. That's our plane. It's so big." "It is. Bigger than the ones you used to fly." Marcus's chest tightened. "Who told you I used to fly?" Jalen turned his eyes wide and innocent. "Grandma. She said you used to fly jets, like real jets, in the war." Marcus exhaled slowly. His mother meant well. She always meant well. But some doors were meant to stay closed. "That was a long time ago, buddy." "But you did? You really flew?" "Yes." "Why'd you stop?" "Because your mother got sick. Because the treatments cost more than my military salary could cover. Because I chose her. I chose you. I chose to be here instead of up there." "Because I had something more important to do," Marcus said quietly. Jalen considered this. "What?" "Be your dad." The boy's face softened into a small smile. "That's a good reason." "I think so too." Group 1 boarded, then Group 2. The first-class passengers disappeared into the jetway with their carry-on champagne and their noise-canceling headphones. Marcus watched them go. Once he had been somebody too. Major Marcus, Ghost Webb, United States Navy. 15 years of service. 247 combat sorties. Instructor pilot at Naval Air Station Oceana. The kind of man who made decisions at 600 miles per hour, who felt the hand of God every time he punched through the clouds. Now he mopped floors. The universe had a sense of humor. Group 5 now boarding. All remaining passengers Group 5. Marcus stood wincing as his lower back protested. 12 hours pushing a cleaning cart through marble hallways did things to a man's spine. Come on, buddy, that's us. They joined the final wave of passengers shuffling toward the gate. Jalen walked slowly, his small legs already tired, one hand clutching the strap of his father's jacket. Dad? Yeah. The lady at the counter was mean. She was busy, buddy. People get stressed when they're busy. You're busy all the time. You're not mean. Marcus smiled despite himself. Well, I've got better reasons to be nice. Like what? Like you. They stepped onto the jetway. The narrow corridor smelled of jet fuel and recycled air. Ahead, the aircraft door waited, like the mouth of some great metal beast. Jalen's grip tightened. You okay? Marcus asked. Yeah, it's loud. It's going to get louder, but that's normal. The engines are just doing their job. Like you do your job. Exactly like that. They reached the cabin door. A flight attendant, blonde early 30s professional smile that didn't reach her eyes checked their boarding passes. 28A and 28B, all the way back left side. Thank you. They walked. The economy cabin was already packed. Passengers crammed bags into overhead bins, argued over armrests, squeezed past each other in the narrow aisle. The air was thick, warm, vaguely unpleasant. Marcus kept one hand on Jalen's shoulder, guiding him forward. Row 10, row 15, row 20. As they passed row 8, the last row of first class before the curtain, a voice stopped them cold. Excuse me. Excuse me. Marcus paused. Turned. A woman sat in seat 8. Her posture rigid, her expression carved from ice. She was perhaps 40, immaculately dressed, her dark hair swept back in a severe bun that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a week. A leather briefcase occupied the seat beside her, and she was gesturing at a flight attendant with the imperious wave of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. Yes, ma'am, the attendant said. Is there a reason economy passengers are being routed through first class I specifically booked this seat to avoid? This. She gestured vaguely at the line of passengers still boarding. At Marcus. At Jalen. I apologize, ma'am. It's our standard boarding procedure. Standard. The woman's laugh was sharp, humorless. There's nothing standard about paying $4,000 for a seat and then having to smell. Whatever that is. She was looking directly at Marcus. His janitor's uniform was clean. He always made sure of that, but the faint scent of industrial cleaning solution was impossible to fully remove. It lived in the fabric now, a permanent reminder of floors scrubbed and toilets cleaned. Ma'am, the attendant began. Don't bother, just move them along, quickly. Marcus said nothing. He simply placed his hand on Jalen's back and guided him forward. But Jalen had heard. Dad? His voice was small, confused. What did she mean? Nothing, buddy. Keep walking. But she was looking at us. She said, I know what she said. It doesn't matter. But, Jalen. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. What do we do when people say hurtful things? The boy recited the lesson like a prayer. We don't react. We wait. We prove them wrong with actions, not words. That's right. Now let's find our seats. Bet. Row 28 was near the back of the plane, sandwiched between the lavatories and the rear galley. The seats were narrow, The legroom minimal, the overhead bin already stuffed full of other passengers' bags. Marcus found space for Jalen's backpack near the front of the cabin 3 rows up. It meant they'd have to wait for everyone else to deplane before retrieving it, but that was fine. He was used to waiting. Jalen took the window seat. Marcus settled into the middle, his shoulders too broad for the cramped space, his knees pressed against the seat in front of him. "You okay?" he asked. Jalen nodded, but his eyes were distant, still processing. "She didn't mean it, buddy." "Then why did she say it? How do you explain cruelty to a child? How do you explain that some people measure the world in dollars and status, that they look at a man in a janitor's uniform and see nothing worth seeing? Some people," Marcus said carefully, "are scared." Scared of what? Of people who are different, of things they don't understand, so they say mean things to feel better about themselves. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't. Jalen was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom wouldn't have said something like that." Marcus's throat tightened. "No, she wouldn't have. She was nice to everyone. She was. I miss her dad." Marcus pulled his son close, feeling the small body settle against his chest. "I miss her too, buddy. Every single day." They sat in silence as the cabin filled. The flight attendants moved through the aisles checking seatbelts, stowing bags, reciting the safety information that nobody ever listened to. Marcus watched the activity with the detached awareness of a man trained to notice everything. The slight vibration of the airframe as the auxiliary power unit hummed to life. The precise timing of the cabin pressurization. The particular frequency of the engine whine as the pilots conducted their pre-flight checks. Old habits. He hadn't sat in a cockpit in almost 4 years. Hadn't felt the throttle in his hand, the stick beneath his fingers, the impossible freedom of breaking through the clouds into endless blue sky. But his body remembered. His body would always remember. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." The PA crackled to life, interrupting Marcus's thoughts. "We'd like to welcome you aboard Flight 1142 with service to Los Angeles. We're currently number 3 for departure, so we should be airborne in approximately 15 minutes. Flight time today will be 5 hours and 22 minutes. We're expecting smooth air for most of the journey with a few patches of light turbulence over the Rockies. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your carry-on items are stowed. Flight attendants prepare for departure." Marcus felt the familiar pull as the aircraft began to taxi. Jalen pressed his face to the window again, watching the terminal slide away. "Here we go," the boy whispered. "Here we go." The engines spooled up. The plane accelerated down the runway. And then, that moment Marcus had always loved, the moment when the wheels left the earth and gravity surrendered. They were airborne. Jalen gasped with delight. "We're flying." "Dad, we're really flying." Marcus smiled, watching his son's face light up with wonder. This, he thought. This was worth everything. The uniform, the long hours, the aching back and the calloused hands, and the way people looked right through him like he didn't exist. This boy, this moment, this joy, worth everything. The woman in first class was named Vivian Ashford. She was the CEO of Ashford Properties International, a real estate empire she had built from nothing over the past 18 years. Her net worth was somewhere north of $300 million. Her face had graced the covers of Forbes, Bloomberg, Businessweek, and the Wall Street Journal. She had dined with senators, vacationed with celebrities, and once spent 45 minutes explaining market dynamics to a former president at a White House reception. She was not accustomed to discomfort. The flight attendant, a young woman named Jessica, approached her seat with a practiced smile. "Ms. Ashford, can I get you anything before we reach cruising altitude? Champagne. Perhaps some water." Vivian didn't look up from her phone. "Sparkling water, lime not lemon, and tell whoever is responsible for the boarding process that I will be writing a letter to your corporate office." "I'm sorry you were inconvenienced, ma'am. I'll pass along your feedback. See that you do. Jessica retreated. Vivian returned to her emails. She had a board meeting in Los Angeles in 6 hours. A presentation that would determine the fate of a $2 billion acquisition. Shareholders to placate, competitors to crush, a world to conquer. She did not have time for inconvenience. She did not have time for economy passengers with their cheap luggage and their cleaning solution smell and their wide-eyed children who didn't understand the basic economics of class stratification. Some people, Vivian firmly believed, were simply born to serve. It wasn't cruel. It was just reality. The sooner everyone accepted that, the better. The plane climbed 30,000 feet, 35,000, 40. Marcus watched the clouds drift past Jalen's window, cotton white mountains against an impossibly blue sky. His son had fallen asleep almost immediately after takeoff, exhausted from the early morning and the long wait at the airport. Marcus envied him. He hadn't slept more than 4 hours at a stretch in months. The jobs, plural, saw to that. Night shift at the financial building from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Weekend security at Westfield Mall, 12-hour days standing on concrete floors. And between all of it, the hospital appointments, the medication schedules, the insurance paperwork that multiplied like some bureaucratic virus. Dr. Chen, Jalen's cardiologist, had been cleared during their last appointment. The valve replacement we did 2 years ago is holding, but there's significant stenosis developing in the left ventricle. He needs a second surgery. There's a specialist in Los Angeles, Dr. Reeves at Cedars-Sinai. He's the best in the country for pediatric cases like Jalen's. How much? The doctor had paused. That pause told Marcus everything. With insurance, you're looking at roughly $60,000 out of pocket. Maybe more depending on complications. $60,000. Marcus had $12,000 in savings. 18 months of scraping and sacrificing and saying no to everything that wasn't absolutely essential. When does he need the surgery? Soon. Within 6 months. The stenosis will only get worse. So here they were, flying to Los Angeles for a consultation with Dr. Reeves. A meeting that would tell Marcus exactly how far $60,000 was from reality. He looked down at his son, at the gentle rise and fall of the small chest, at the faint scar visible beneath the collar of the Captain America shirt. I'll find a way, Marcus thought. I always find a way, even if it kills me. The first sign of trouble came an hour into the flight. Marcus felt it before anyone else did, a subtle vibration in the airframe, a frequency that didn't match the normal harmonic signature of a Boeing 737 at cruising altitude. He straightened in his seat, his hand instinctively moving to the armrest, fingers pressing against the plastic to triangulate the source. There. Left side. Mid-wing. The shudder was intermittent, barely perceptible, but wrong. Completely wrong. He closed his eyes, letting his training take over. After 15 years of flying, his body had become an instrument. He could feel turbulence before it hit, sense mechanical anomalies through vibrations too subtle for civilian pilots to detect. This wasn't turbulence. This was something else. Dad! Jalen's voice pulled him back. The boy was awake now, rubbing his eyes. Hey, buddy. Good nap. I dreamed about Mom. Marcus's chest tightened. Yeah. What was she doing? She was flying. Like really flying. With wings and everything. She said she was watching us. That sounds like a nice dream. It was. Jalen paused, his head tilting slightly. Dad, the plane feels funny. Marcus kept his voice steady. What do you mean? It's shaking, but not like normal shaking. 8 years old, 62 pounds, a scar on his chest and a heart that needed fixing, and he could feel it too. It's probably just some rough air, buddy. Nothing to worry about. Are you sure? No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure at all. I'm sure. Why don't you look at the clouds? They're really pretty right now. Jalen turned to the window, momentarily distracted. Marcus kept his hand on the armrest, feeling the vibration continue. Something was wrong with this airplane, and he was the only one who knew it. In the cockpit, Captain David Morrison was reviewing the flight plan with his first officer, a younger man named Kevin Park. Morrison was 58 years old, a former Air Force transport pilot who had transitioned to commercial aviation 20 years ago. He had logged over 20,000 flight hours, survived 3 emergency landings, and earned a reputation as one of the steadiest captains in the company. He had also been experiencing intermittent chest pain for the past 6 weeks. His wife had begged him to see a doctor. He'd promised he would after this rotation. Just one more trip. Just one more. "Looking good," Park said, scanning the instruments. "We should hit our initial descent point right on schedule." "Good. I want to stay ahead of that weather system building over the Rockies." "Roger that. I'll start coordinating with LA Center in about an hour." Morrison nodded, then frowned. "You feel that—" Park looked up. "Feel what?" "That vibration. In the yoke." Park placed his hands on his own control column, concentrating. "I don't... Wait. Yeah. There's something. Faint, though." Morrison studied the instruments. Everything read normal. Hydraulics nominal. Engine parameters within limits. Flight control surfaces responding correctly. But that vibration... "Let's keep an eye on it," he said. "Probably nothing, but I don't like things I can't explain." "Want me to run a diagnostic?" "Do it. Better safe than sorry." Park began entering commands into the flight management computer. In seat 28, a Marcus Webb sat perfectly still, his hand pressed against the armrest, his eyes closed. Waiting. The vibration grew stronger. 20 minutes had passed. Jalen was coloring in a small activity book the flight attendant had provided, his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. Marcus hadn't moved. He was running calculations in his head now, drawing on 15 years of experience to diagnose a problem he couldn't see. The frequency of the vibration suggested hydraulic fluctuation. The location suggested the left wing route, where the primary hydraulic lines ran from the fuselage to the flight control actuators. If he was right, and he was almost certain he was, the plane was developing a serious problem. Not catastrophic. Not yet. But getting there. "Excuse me," a flight attendant, Jessica. The same one who had dealt with Vivian Ashford paused by his row. "Sir, is everything okay? You look concerned." Marcus hesitated. What was he supposed to say? "I'm a former fighter pilot, and I can feel that your airplane is experiencing hydraulic degradation that your civilian pilots probably haven't detected yet." He'd sound insane. "I'm fine," he said. "Just a little airsick." Jessica nodded sympathetically. "Can I get you some ginger ale? Sometimes that helps." "That would be great. Thank you." She moved on. Marcus returned his attention to the armrest. The vibration was definitely getting worse. In first class, Vivian Ashford was on her 3rd conference call of the flight. "I don't care what the environmental impact report says," she was saying into her phone, her voice low but intense. "We have permits. We have approvals. If those activists want to chain themselves to bulldozers, that's their problem. Our construction timeline does not change. Am I clear?" She listened for a moment, then cut in sharply. "Martin, I'm paying you $300,000 a year to solve problems, not to bring them to me. If you can't handle a few protesters, I'll find someone who can. Call me when it's done." She hung up and rubbed her temples. The price of success, she thought, surrounded by incompetence. The plane shuddered slightly. Vivian frowned, glancing up from her phone. "Turbulence," she muttered, and returned to her emails. The announcement came 12 minutes later. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking." The cabin fell quiet. Something in Morrison's voice, a subtle tension that most passengers wouldn't notice, but that Marcus detected instantly, demanded attention. We've encountered some mild technical irregularities that we're currently monitoring. As a precaution, I'm going to ask the flight attendants to suspend cabin service and return to their seats. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your personal items are secured. This is purely precautionary, and I'll update you as soon as we have more information. Thank you for your patience. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a soft chime. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged nervous glances. A baby started crying somewhere in the back. Jalen looked up from his coloring book. "Dad, what's happening?" Marcus squeezed his son's hand. "The pilots are just being careful, buddy. That's all." "Is the plane okay?" "The pilots know what they're doing." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't exactly the truth either. Because Marcus knew something the pilots didn't. He knew what that vibration meant. He knew the sequence of failures that could follow. He knew that mild technical irregularities was aviation speak for "we have a problem we don't fully understand." And he knew that in approximately 20 minutes, maybe less, this situation was going to get much, much worse. He pulled Jalen close and held him tight. Whatever happened next, he would protect his son. Whatever it took. The plane shuddered again, harder this time, and Marcus Webb began to pray. The shudder passed through the cabin like a wave, and Marcus felt his entire body shift into a mode he hadn't accessed in nearly 4 years. His breathing slowed, his pupils dilated slightly. His awareness expanded to encompass every sound, every vibration, every subtle change in the aircraft's behavior. This was how he used to feel in the cockpit of his F-18 when the radar warning receiver lit up and he had 3 seconds to decide between life and death. "Dad!" Jalen's voice was small, frightened. "Why did the plane do that?" "Just some bumpy air, buddy." It didn't feel like bumpy air. No, Marcus thought. It didn't. He placed his hand flat against the cabin wall, feeling the vibration through his palm. The frequency had changed. What had been a subtle, almost imperceptible oscillation was now a distinct rhythmic pulse, cycling every 4 to 5 seconds. Hydraulic pump cavitation. Had to be. The system was fighting itself, trying to maintain pressure against a leak or a failing component. The pumps were working overtime, cycling on and off as the pressure dropped and recovered. How long before the system gave up entirely? 30 minutes, 20 less. Marcus didn't know. This wasn't his aircraft. He didn't know its systems, its redundancies, its failure modes. All he had was instinct, and 15 years of experience telling him that this plane was sick and getting sicker. "Sir." He looked up. Jessica, the flight attendant, had paused by his row again, her face now showing the strain that her training was struggling to hide. "I brought your ginger ale." Marcus took the plastic cup. "Thank you. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How long have you been flying?" Jessica blinked, caught off guard by the question. 12 years. Why? Have you ever felt a vibration like this before?" Her smile faltered. "I'm sure it's nothing to worry about," the captain said. "I know what the captain said." Marcus kept his voice low, calm, non-threatening. "I'm asking what you feel." Jessica glanced toward the galley, then back at Marcus. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Something's wrong. I don't know what. But I've been on 1,000 flights and this doesn't feel right." "I know." "You know?" "I know." She stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. Not the janitor's uniform, or the calloused hands, or the economy seat. Something else. Something in his eyes. "Who are you?" she asked. Before Marcus could answer, the plane lurched again. Harder. The overhead bins rattled. A woman screamed somewhere behind them. Jessica grabbed the headrest to steady herself. "I have to go," she said. "Stay in your seat. Keep your seatbelt fastened." She hurried toward the front of the cabin, and Marcus watched her go. Jalen was gripping his arm now, his small fingers digging into the fabric of Marcus's uniform. "Dad, I'm scared." Marcus pulled his son close, wrapping both arms around him. I know, buddy, I know. But I need you to listen to me, okay? Can you do that? Jalen nodded against his chest. Whatever happens, I want you to stay calm. Don't panic. Don't scream. Just breathe and stay close to me. Can you do that? Yes. Good boy. You're doing great. I'm so proud of you. Dad. Yeah. Are we going to crash? Marcus closed his eyes. How do you answer a question like that? How do you tell your 8-year-old son that you don't know that the plane is failing and the pilots might not be able to fix it, that the world might end in the next 30 minutes? You don't. You lie. No, buddy, we're not going to crash. I won't let that happen. Promise? I promise. It was the biggest lie Marcus had ever told, and he meant every word of it. The captain's voice crackled over the PA again, and this time there was no hiding the tension. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison. We've identified a technical issue with one of our flight systems. As a precaution, we're beginning a descent to a lower altitude. You may feel some unusual sensations during this maneuver. Please remain calm and keep your seatbelt securely fastened. I'll update you as soon as I have more information. The plane began to descend. Not the gentle, controlled descent of a normal approach, but something steeper, more urgent. Marcus felt his ears pop as the cabin pressure changed. Around him, passengers were starting to panic. Voices rose. Someone was crying. A man 3 rows up was shouting into his phone, trying to get a signal that didn't exist at 40,000 feet. In first class, Vivian Ashford had finally stopped working. Her laptop sat forgotten on the tray table, her phone clutched uselessly in her hand. For the first time in perhaps 20 years, she had encountered a problem that money couldn't solve. This is unacceptable, she said to no one in particular. This is completely unacceptable. The passenger next to her, a middle-aged man in a business suit, turned to her with barely concealed contempt. Lady, I don't think the plane cares whether you accept it or not. Vivian's mouth opened then closed. She had no response. For once in her life, she had nothing to say. Marcus watched this exchange through the gap in the curtain that separated first class from economy. Even now, even as the plane shuddered and dropped, some part of Vivian Ashford was still clinging to the belief that she deserved special treatment. She's going to learn, Marcus thought. One way or another, she's going to learn. The plane dropped again. 50 feet. 100. The descent was becoming erratic, the pilots clearly fighting to maintain control. Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. Primary hydraulic failure would explain the vibration and the control difficulties. But modern aircraft had redundant systems specifically designed to handle such failures. For the pilots to be struggling this much, something else had to be wrong. Secondary hydraulic failure. Electrical system degradation. Flight control. Computer malfunction. He needed more information. He needed to see the instruments, to feel the controls, to understand what was happening from the inside. But he was just a passenger. Seat 28A. A janitor in a worn uniform with a sick child and no authority whatsoever. What could he possibly do? Excuse me. A voice from the aisle. Excuse me, sir? Marcus looked up. A man was standing there, mid-40s, wearing an expensive suit and a terrified expression. Are you a pilot? Someone said you were asking questions about the plane. Word travels fast, Marcus thought. Even on a dying aircraft. I used to fly, he said carefully. Used to? What kind of planes? Military. The man's eyes widened. Military like fighter jets. Something like that. Oh, thank God. The man actually slumped with relief. Can you do something? Can you help? Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not. Please. The man grabbed Marcus's arm, his grip desperate. I have 2 daughters at home. They're 11 and 13. Their mother died 2 years ago. I'm all they have. Please, if you can do anything. Marcus looked at this man, saw the raw terror in his eyes, the desperation of a father who had already lost too much. He understood that desperation. He lived with it every day. "What's your name?" Marcus asked. "Thomas. Thomas Chen." "Thomas, I need you to go back to your seat. Keep your seatbelt fastened. Stay calm. Can you do that?" "But—" "I'll do what I can. But right now, the best thing you can do for your daughters is to stay calm and stay safe. Okay?" Thomas nodded slowly, reluctantly. "Okay. Okay, I understand." He started to turn away, then stopped. "Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for trying." He returned to his seat, and Marcus watched him go. "Dad." Jalen was looking up at him. "That man thinks you can help." "Maybe." "Can you—" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't know how. The plane shuddered again, and this time, it didn't stop. The vibration became constant, a trembling that seemed to shake the very molecules of the air. Marcus pressed his hand against the wall once more, feeling the rhythm of the aircraft's distress. Worse. Much worse. The hydraulic system was failing completely. The pumps were running continuously now, trying to maintain pressure against a leak that was growing beyond their capacity to compensate. How much longer? 10 minutes 5. He thought about Elena, about the way she had looked at him when he came home from deployment, the pride in her eyes mixed with relief that he had survived another mission. "You're not just a pilot," she used to say. "You're a guardian. You protect people. That's who you are." He had believed her once, before the cancer took her, before the medical bills destroyed them, before he traded his flight suit for a janitor's uniform and learned what it meant to be invisible. But maybe she was right. Maybe that's still who he was underneath everything. A guardian, a protector. The aircraft shuddered violently, and Marcus made a decision. He reached down and unbuckled Jalen's seatbelt, then his own. "Dad, what are you doing? I need you to stay here, buddy. I need you to be brave. Where are you going?" Marcus knelt in the narrow space between seats, bringing his face level with his son's. He cupped Jalen's cheeks in his hands, feeling the soft skin, the delicate bones beneath. "Remember what I told you about your mom, about why I stopped flying?" Jalen nodded. "You said you had something more important to do, being my dad." "That's right. And being your dad is still the most important thing in my life. But right now, buddy, I think I need to help. I think I need to go up to the front of the plane and try to help the pilots." "Because you used to fly?" "Because I used to fly." Jalen's eyes were wide, glistening with tears. "Are you going to save us, Dad?" "I'm going to try." "Like a superhero." Marcus smiled despite everything. "I'm not a superhero, buddy. I'm just your dad. But sometimes dads have to do hard things to protect the people they love." Jalen reached into his pocket and pulled out the small model F-18, the one Elena had given him. He pressed it into Marcus's hand. "Take this," he said. "For luck. Mom said it would protect you." Marcus stared at the toy, feeling its weight, remembering the day Elena had bought it at the Naval Air Station gift shop. "I'll give it back to you," he said, his voice thick. "I promise." "I know." Marcus kissed his son's forehead, holding the moment as long as he dared. Then he stood up. "Excuse me." He addressed the passenger in the aisle seat, a heavy-set man who had been gripping his armrests in white-knuckled terror. "I need to get out." The man didn't argue. He simply pressed himself back against his seat, giving Marcus room to pass. Marcus stepped into the aisle. The cabin had descended into controlled chaos. Passengers were crying, praying, clutching each other. The flight attendants were moving through the rows, their voices calm, but their eyes betraying their fear. Marcus walked forward. He passed row 25, row 20, row 15. People looked up as he passed, sensing something different about him. The way he moved, the steadiness of his gaze, the calm amid the storm. "Where are you going?" someone asked. He didn't answer. Row 10, row 8. He reached the curtain separating economy from first class. Jessica, the flight attendant, was there blocking his path. "Sir, I need you to return to your seat. I can help." "Sir, please. Listen to me." Marcus's voice was quiet but commanding. "I'm a former Navy pilot, 15 years of service, 200 combat missions. I have experience with emergency flight operations that your pilots don't have. I can hear what's happening to this aircraft, and I'm telling you right now that they're running out of time." Jessica stared at him. "How do you know?" "The hydraulic system is failing. I can feel it in the vibration. Your pilots are compensating with manual control inputs, but that's a losing battle. Eventually, the system will fail completely, and when that happens, this aircraft will become unflyable." "But the backups are failing too. That's why the vibration keeps getting worse. I don't know why, but something has compromised multiple systems simultaneously. Your pilots need help. Let me through." Jessica's face was pale, her decision hanging in the balance. Behind her, Marcus could hear voices from the cockpit, tense and urgent. "Please," he said. "I have a son on this plane, an 8-year-old boy who's waiting for me to come back. I'm not going to let him down. I'm not going to let any of these people down. But I need you to trust me." Jessica looked at him for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. "The cockpit is at the end of the galley. Knock 3 times and identify yourself." "Thank you." Marcus pushed through the curtain and came face to face with Vivian Ashford. She was standing in the aisle, blocking his path, her face a mask of barely contained terror. "You," she said. "You're the one from earlier. The one with the child." "Yes." "Where are you going?" "To help." Vivian laughed, the sound brittle and harsh. "Help you? You're a janitor. You can't possibly—" "Ma'am, I don't have time for this." "You don't have time." Her voice rose. "Do you know who I am? I am Vivian Ashford. I am the CEO of—" "I don't care who you are." Marcus cut her off, his voice flat. "Your money can't fly this plane. Your title can't fix the hydraulics. Your reputation can't save your life. Right now, you are nothing more than a passenger, same as everyone else, same as me, same as my son." Vivian's mouth opened, opened again. "Now, please move," Marcus said, "or I will move you." For a moment, he thought she might argue, might try to stop him, might do something foolish. But something in his eyes must have convinced her, because she stepped aside without another word. Marcus walked past her toward the cockpit door. The galley was cramped, cluttered with service carts that hadn't been properly stowed. Marcus navigated around them, his focus narrowing to a single point, the reinforced cockpit door at the end of the corridor. He knocked 3 times. A muffled voice from inside. "Who is it?" "My name is Marcus Webb, former Major United States Navy. Call sign Ghost. I have 3,000 hours of tactical flight time and 247 combat sorties. Your aircraft is experiencing hydraulic failure and I can help." Silence. Then the click of a lock disengaging. The door opened. The face that greeted him was gray with exhaustion and pain. Captain David Morrison, 58 years old, veteran of 20,000 flight hours, was sweating profusely, his left hand pressed against his chest. "You're really a pilot?" His voice was strained, breathy. "Yes, sir." "Thank God." Morrison stepped back, gesturing Marcus inside. "We need you." Marcus entered the cockpit. The scene was worse than he had feared. First Officer Kevin Park was slumped in the right seat, unconscious. His face was ashen, his breathing shallow. A flight attendant was kneeling beside him, pressing a portable oxygen mask to his face. "What happened?" Marcus asked. "Collapsed about 10 minutes ago." Morrison said, his voice tight. "Suspected heart attack. We've been trying to manage alone since then. And you, Captain, how are you feeling?" Morrison's face flickered with something like shame. "Chest pain. Started about an hour ago. I thought I could push through, but—" He pressed his hand harder against his sternum. "It's getting worse." Marcus understood immediately. The captain was having cardiac symptoms, maybe a heart attack of his own. The stress of flying a failing aircraft alone was pushing his body past its breaking point. "Show me what we're dealing with," Marcus said. Morrison gestured toward the instrument panel. "Primary hydraulics failed about 30 minutes ago. Backup system kicked in, but it's been degrading steadily. We've lost most of our control authority on the port side. Flight control computers are in degraded mode trying to compensate." Marcus scanned the instruments, his trained eyes taking in the cascade of warning lights, the abnormal readings, the telltale signs of a system in collapse. What caused the primary failure? We don't know. Maintenance log was clear. No indications of any problems before departure. Marcus leaned closer to the engine instruments. Then he saw it. There. He pointed at a small gauge that most civilian pilots wouldn't think to check. "Your port engine oil pressure. It's been fluctuating." Morrison squinted at the gauge. "That's within normal parameters." "Barely. And look at the trend. It's been dropping steadily for the past hour." "What does that mean?" Marcus straightened his mind, racing through the possibilities. "Your port engine has a slow oil leak. It's been contaminating the hydraulic reservoir. Oil and hydraulic fluid don't mix well. The contamination is degrading your pumps, causing the pressure fluctuations I've been feeling throughout the flight." "You've been feeling them?" "I flew fighter jets for 15 years, Captain. I can feel things in an aircraft that most pilots never learn to notice." Morrison stared at him. "Who are you?" "Right now, I'm the only chance you've got." Marcus moved toward the empty right seat. "May I?" Morrison nodded weakly. "Please. I don't know how much longer I can—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus slid into the first officer's seat, feeling the yoke beneath his hands for the first time in 4 years. The sensation was both familiar and foreign, like coming home to a house that had been redecorated in his absence. He gripped the controls, feeling the aircraft's behavior through the stick. Heavy, sluggish, fighting him with every input. "How bad is it?" Morrison asked. "Bad, but not hopeless." Marcus began running through options in his head. "We need to reduce our reliance on hydraulics. What's our fuel state?" "About 2 hours worth." "Good. That gives us options. What's the nearest suitable airport?" Morrison checked the navigation display. "Denver International. About 40 minutes out." "Too far. We need somewhere closer. This system isn't going to hold for 40 minutes. "There's Colorado Springs, regional airport, shorter runways, but it's only 20 minutes away." "What's the runway length?" "About 9,000 feet." Marcus nodded. "That'll work. Contact ATC. Declare an emergency. Tell them we need priority handling for Colorado Springs." Morrison reached for the radio, then winced, his hand going to his chest. "Captain, are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just—" "You're not fine. Let me handle the communications." Marcus keyed the radio. "Denver Center, this is United Flight 1142, declaring an emergency. We have multiple hydraulic failures and incapacitated crew members. Requesting immediate vectors to Colorado Springs Airport." The response came instantly, the controller's voice professionally calm. "United 1142, Denver Center copies your emergency. Turn right, heading 270, descend, and maintain flight level 250. We're clearing traffic and notifying Colorado Springs approach." "Roger, Denver Center. Right turn to 270, descending to 250. Marcus applied gentle pressure to the yoke, feeling the aircraft respond sluggishly. The control surfaces were moving, but barely. Every input required twice the force it should have. Behind him, Morrison slumped in his seat, his breathing becoming labored. "Captain, I need you to stay with me," Marcus said. "Talk to me. Tell me about your family." "My family." "Yes. Keep talking. It'll help." Morrison's voice was weak but steady. "I have a wife. Linda, 32 years, 2 daughters grown now, 3 grandchildren." "What are their names?" "Sophie, Michael, and little Emma. Emma just turned 2 last month." "That's beautiful. You're going to see them again, Captain. I promise you that. How can you promise something like that? Marcus didn't answer. He was too busy flying the aircraft, coaxing it through the sky with a combination of skill, instinct, and sheer determination. The plane shuddered, then steadied, shuddered again. We're losing more hydraulics, Marcus said calmly. I'm going to try something. He reached for the throttle quadrant, adjusting the power settings on each engine independently. In a normal aircraft, this would be unnecessary. But with the control surfaces failing, he needed to find alternative ways to maneuver. Differential thrust. The technique he had learned in combat when battle damage had destroyed his control surfaces, and the only way to steer was by varying the power to each engine. He pushed the right engine up, pulled the left engine back. The aircraft yawed slightly, beginning a gentle turn. "What are you doing?" Morrison asked. "Flying without controls. It's a military technique. Not something they teach in civilian school, but it works." He continued adjusting, finding the rhythm, learning the aircraft's behavior in this degraded state. It was like learning to walk again after breaking both legs, but Marcus had done harder things. He had watched his wife die. He had told his son that everything would be okay. This was nothing compared to that. The aircraft steadied, settling into a controlled descent toward Colorado Springs. Behind him, Morrison had stopped talking, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow but steady. Marcus was alone now. The only conscious pilot on an aircraft carrying 200 souls through a Colorado sky. No pressure. He thought about Jalen sitting back in seat 28, clutching his coloring book and waiting for his father to return. He thought about the model F-18 in his pocket, the last gift from a mother who believed her husband could touch the sky. "I'm coming back, buddy," Marcus whispered. "I promised." The aircraft shuddered once more, and Marcus Webb flew on. The cockpit had become a battlefield. Marcus fought the yoke with both hands, feeling the aircraft resist every input like a wounded animal refusing to cooperate with the surgeon trying to save its life. Sweat dripped down his forehead, stinging his eyes, but he didn't dare release his grip to wipe it away. "Denver Center United, 1-142. We're passing flight level 300 in descent. I need to advise you that our control authority is continuing to degrade. I may need to deviate from assigned headings." The controller's voice came back immediately, professional but tense. "United 1-142, Denver Center copies. You're cleared to maneuver as necessary. All traffic is being cleared from your path. Colorado Springs is standing by with emergency equipment." "Roger, Denver Center. Appreciate the help." Marcus released the transmit button and returned his full attention to the dying aircraft. The instrument panel was a Christmas tree of warning lights. Master caution. Hydraulic pressure low. Flight control degraded. Each light represented another system, failing, another piece of the puzzle falling apart. Behind him, Captain Morrison groaned softly. Still alive, still breathing, but barely. "Captain, can you hear me?" No response. "Captain Morrison. David, I need you to stay with me." A weak voice barely audible over the drone of the engines. "I'm here, still here." "Good. Keep talking to me. Tell me about Linda. How did you meet?" Morrison's voice was dreamy, distant. "College. She was studying nursing. I was ROTC. She thought pilots were arrogant." "Was she right?" A ghost of a laugh. "Absolutely. But she loved me anyway. That's what good women do." Marcus adjusted the throttles again, compensating for another drop in hydraulic pressure. "They love us despite ourselves. Your wife?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. "She died. 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. Gave me a son. Gave me a purpose." He paused, fighting a sudden wave of emotion. "She's the reason I'm here, actually. The reason I learned to fly. The reason I learned to never give up." "What was her name?" "Elena." "That's beautiful." She was beautiful. Marcus blinked hard, forcing himself to focus on the instruments. And right now she's watching. She's watching me try to bring her son home safe. I'm not going to let her down." The aircraft shuddered violently, and for a terrifying moment, Marcus lost control entirely. The nose pitched down, the left wing dropped, and the airframe began to roll. 200 passengers screamed as one. Marcus reacted on instinct, jamming the right throttle forward while pulling the left back to idle. The differential thrust caught the roll, arrested the pitch, brought the aircraft back to something resembling stable flight. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his temples. "That was close," Morrison whispered. "Yeah." Marcus's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. "Yeah, it was." In the cabin, chaos had erupted. The violent maneuver had thrown unsecured items throughout the aircraft. Bags tumbled from overhead bins. Drinks spilled across laps. A food service cart broke free from its restraints and rolled down the aisle, scattering its contents. Jessica, the flight attendant, was on her feet immediately, her training overriding her terror. "Everyone stay in your seats. Keep your seatbelts fastened. Heads down. Stay down." Passengers were crying, screaming, praying. Some were clutching each other. Others sat in stunned silence, staring at nothing, their minds unable to process what was happening. In seat 28, a Jalen Webb sat perfectly still. He wasn't crying. He wasn't screaming. He was holding his Captain America shirt with both hands, his eyes fixed on the front of the cabin where his father had disappeared. "Please, God," he whispered, his voice too soft for anyone to hear. "Please bring my daddy back. Please don't let him die like Mommy. Please." The prayer of an 8-year-old boy, simple, pure, desperate. A hand touched his shoulder. He looked up. Thomas Chen, the man who had spoken to his father earlier, had moved to the empty seat beside him. "Hey, buddy. What's your name?" "Jalen." "Jalen, I'm Thomas. Your dad asked me to keep an eye on you." Jalen studied the man's face, seeing the fear there, but also something else. Determination. Kindness. "My dad's going to save us," Jalen said. "He promised." Thomas nodded slowly. "I believe he will. He used to fly jets, real jets. My mom told me he was a hero. I think he still is." Jalen reached into the seat pocket and pulled out his coloring book, the one he'd been working on before everything went wrong. He opened it to a page he'd been saving, a picture of a fighter jet outlined in black, waiting to be filled with color. "I was going to give this to him," Jalen said. "When we landed. I was going to color it and give it to him as a surprise." Thomas felt his eyes burn with tears he couldn't shed. Not now. Not in front of this brave little boy. "Why don't you finish it now?" he suggested. "So it's ready when he comes back." Jalen thought about this. Then he nodded, picked up a blue crayon, and began to color. The aircraft shook around them, but Jalen Webb kept coloring, filling in the sky around the fighter jet his father used to fly. In first class, Vivian Ashford had stopped pretending. The mask was gone. The persona she had carefully constructed over decades of corporate warfare had crumbled completely. She sat in her expensive seat. Her designer clothes rumpled her perfectly styled hair in disarray, and she wept. Not elegant, dignified tears. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. The kind of crying she hadn't allowed herself since she was a child. Since she had learned that tears were weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. The passenger beside her, the man who had challenged her earlier, watched with a mixture of pity and something like understanding. "First time?" he asked quietly. Vivian looked at him, her makeup streaming down her face. "What?" "First time facing something you can't control, something your money can't fix." She wanted to be angry, wanted to summon the cold-cutting persona that had served her so well in boardrooms and negotiations. But she couldn't find it. It had abandoned her, leaving only this terrified, vulnerable woman in its place. "I've never—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "None of us have." That's the thing about death. It doesn't care about your resume. Vivian thought about her life, the empire she had built, the money she had accumulated, the people she had stepped on along the way. What did any of it mean now? She thought about the man from economy class, the janitor in the worn uniform, the father she had mocked for having the audacity to exist in her presence. He was up there now, in the cockpit, fighting to save her life. The irony was so sharp it drew blood. I was terrible to him. She said the words spilling out unbidden. The man who's flying the plane. I said awful things, in front of his son. Her seatmate shrugged. People say awful things all the time. No, you don't understand. I looked at him and I saw nothing. I saw someone beneath me, someone who didn't matter. Her voice cracked. And now he's the only person on this plane who matters. Then maybe, the man said gently, if we survive this, you should tell him that. Vivian nodded, wiping her face with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. If we survive. If. In the cockpit, Marcus was counting. It was a technique he'd learned in combat, a way to manage the overwhelming flood of information and stimuli that came with flying a damaged aircraft. Count the seconds between tasks. Count the breaths between decisions. Count the heartbeats between life and death. 1. Adjust the throttles. 2. Check the altitude. 3. Monitor the hydraulic pressure. 4. Scan for the runway. 5. Start over. The rhythm kept him focused, kept him from drowning in the cascade of failures that surrounded him. United 1142 Colorado Springs approach. We have you on radar, 15 miles northeast. Runway 17. Right is cleared and ready. Winds are 160 at 12 knots. Emergency equipment is standing by. Roger, Colorado Springs. United 1142 is 15 miles out. I need to advise you I have minimal control authority. This is going to be an unconventional approach. A pause. Then, United 1142, understand unconventional approach. The runway is yours. Whatever you need to do. Whatever you need to do. Marcus almost laughed. What he needed to do was impossible. Land a 737 with almost no hydraulics, using techniques that weren't even taught in civilian flight schools. Techniques that he had learned in combat when his F-18 had taken damage and he'd had to nurse it back to the carrier with half his control surfaces shot away. But an F-18 was not a 737. A carrier deck was not a civilian runway, and Marcus Webb was not the pilot he had been 4 years ago. Or was he? He thought about Elena again, about the last conversation they'd had before she slipped into the final coma. You're going to be okay. She had whispered, her hand cold in his. You and Jalen, you're going to be okay. How do you know? Because you're the strongest man I've ever known. Because you've never given up on anything in your life. Because... She had paused, gathering strength for the final words. Because you were born to fly, Marcus. Even when you're on the ground, you're still flying. That's who you are. He had buried that part of himself after she died. Packed it away with his medals and his flight logs and his memories of better days. He had convinced himself that Major Marcus Ghost Webb was gone, replaced by a janitor who mopped floors and counted the days until his son's next surgery. But Ghost wasn't gone. Ghost had been waiting. Okay, Marcus said aloud, his voice steady. Let's do this. He began his approach. The technique was called differential thrust landing, and it was something most pilots only knew from textbooks. Without functional control surfaces, the only way to steer the aircraft was by varying the power to each engine. More power on the right engine would yaw the nose left. More power on the left would yaw it right. Pitch could be controlled roughly by adjusting the overall power setting. It was crude. It was dangerous. It was almost certainly going to result in a hard landing, but it was the only chance they had. Denver Center, United 1142 is beginning final approach. Roger, 1142. Good luck. Good luck. Two words that meant everything and nothing at the same time. Marcus focused on the runway ahead, a strip of concrete in the distance growing slowly larger as they descended. His entire world narrowed to that single target. Behind him, Morrison had gone silent. Still breathing but unconscious now, his body finally surrendering to the stress and pain. Marcus was truly alone. The aircraft bucked as they descended through a patch of turbulent air. Marcus compensated instinctively, adjusting the throttles, keeping the nose pointed at the runway. 8 miles out. The hydraulic pressure gauge flickered. Dropped. Flickered again. Come on, Marcus muttered. Just a little longer. Hold together. Just a little longer. 6 miles. The aircraft began to drift left. Marcus applied right differential thrust, bringing it back on course. But the response was sluggish, delayed. The hydraulics were almost gone. 4 miles. Warning alarms began to blare. The autopilot, which had been struggling to assist, finally gave up entirely. A robotic voice filled the cockpit. Autopilot disconnect, autopilot disconnect. Yeah, I noticed, Marcus said grimly. 2 miles. The runway filled the windscreen now, a beautiful ribbon of concrete salvation. Marcus could see the emergency vehicles lined up along the sides, their lights flashing red and blue. 1 mile. United 1142. You're looking good. Keep it coming. Marcus didn't respond. Every ounce of his concentration was focused on the landing. 1/2 mile. The ground rushed up to meet them. Marcus pulled the throttles back, trying to slow their descent. But without full control surfaces, there was only so much he could do. They were coming in too fast. Too steep. Come on, Marcus whispered. Come on, baby. Work with me. He thought about Jalen, about the small model F-18 in his pocket, about the promise he had made. I'm coming back, buddy. The wheels touched. The impact was brutal, far harder than any landing Marcus had ever made. The aircraft slammed onto the runway with a force that rattled every bone in his body. The tires screamed in protest. The airframe groaned like a wounded animal. But they were down. Marcus stood on the brakes, or what was left of them. The aircraft decelerated, but slowly, too slowly. The end of the runway was approaching fast. Come on, come on, come on! He applied reverse thrust, jamming the throttles into the reverse detent. The engines roared as they fought to slow the massive aircraft. 5,000 feet of runway left. 4,000. 3,000. The aircraft was slowing, but would it be enough? 2,000. Marcus could see the grass beyond the runway end, now the rough terrain that would destroy them if they overran. 1,000. He closed his eyes. Elena. The aircraft stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Marcus sat in the cockpit, his hands still gripping the yoke, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. They had stopped. They were safe. He opened his eyes. Through the windscreen, he could see the emergency vehicles racing toward them, their sirens wailing. Fire trucks. Ambulances. The cavalry arriving too late to do anything but clean up. But there was nothing to clean up. They were alive. United 1142, the tower said, and even the controller's professional voice was cracking. Welcome to Colorado Springs. That was the most incredible piece of flying I've ever seen. Marcus keyed the microphone one last time. Thank you, Colorado Springs. I need medical assistance for the flight crew immediately. The captain and first officer are both incapacitated, and... He paused, his voice finally breaking. And please tell the passengers they can breathe now. Tell them it's over. He released the microphone and slumped back in the seat. In the cabin, the announcement came through the PA system, delivered by Jessica, the flight attendant, her voice thick with tears. Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed safely. Please remain in your seats until emergency personnel can assist us. We're going to be okay. Thanks to... "Thanks to one of our passengers, we're going to be okay." The reaction was not immediate cheering. It was something deeper, more profound. A collective exhale, a release of tension so intense it was almost painful. Some passengers laughed, others cried. Many did both. In seat 28, a Jalen Webb clutched his finished coloring page and smiled. "I told you," he said to Thomas Chen. "I told you my daddy would save us." Thomas put his arm around the boy, no longer trying to hide his tears. "Yes, you did. Yes, you did." In first class, Vivian Ashford sat perfectly still, staring at nothing. The tears had stopped, but the transformation had only begun. She was not the same woman who had boarded this plane in Newark. She would never be that woman again. The cabin doors opened. Emergency personnel flooded the aircraft, helping passengers to their feet, guiding them toward the exits. Medical teams rushed toward the cockpit, toward the incapacitated crew members. And through it all, one man sat alone in the first officer's seat, his hand still resting on the yoke, his eyes closed, his lips moving in silent prayer. "Thank you, Elena. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for teaching me to fly." Marcus Webb stayed in that seat until the medical team insisted he move, until they checked his vital signs and declared him miraculously uninjured, until they wrapped a shock blanket around his shoulders and led him toward the cabin door. He walked through first class, past the empty seats, past the scattered debris of luxury disrupted. He walked through economy, past the rows of passengers who had watched a janitor become a hero. He walked toward seat 28A. And there, standing in the aisle, holding a coloring page with a blue fighter jet soaring through a perfectly colored sky, was his son. "Daddy!" Jalen ran to him, and Marcus caught him in his arms, lifting him off the ground, holding him so tight that neither of them could breathe. "I knew you'd come back," Jalen whispered into his father's ear. "I knew it." "I promised," Marcus said, his voice breaking completely. "I always keep my promises." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small model F-18, pressed it into Jalen's hands. "For luck," Marcus said. "Just like Mom said." Jalen looked at the toy, then at his father, then at the toy again. "You can keep it," the boy said solemnly. "I think you need it more than me." Marcus laughed through his tears. "Maybe we can share it." "Okay, sharing is good." They stood there in the aisle of the damaged aircraft, a father and son embracing while the world rushed around them. Emergency personnel, media crews, airline officials, none of it mattered. For Marcus Webb, the only thing that mattered was the small body in his arms, the steady heartbeat against his chest, the voice in his ear saying, "I love you, Daddy," over and over again. The janitor from seat 28A had saved 200 lives. But the only life that mattered to him was this one. The tarmac was chaos. Marcus walked down the emergency stairs, with Jalen still clinging to his neck, the boy's legs wrapped around his waist like he would never let go. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, their lights painting everything in alternating red and blue. Firefighters stood ready with hoses. Paramedics rushed past with stretchers. Airport security struggled to establish a perimeter against the growing crowd of onlookers. None of it felt real. Marcus's legs were shaking. His arms burned from the effort of fighting the dying aircraft. His mind was still somewhere up there, 30,000 feet above the earth, counting seconds between heartbeats. "Sir, can you hear me?" A paramedic appeared in front of him, young Ernest, his hands already reaching for Marcus's vitals. "I'm fine," Marcus said automatically. "Sir, you need to be examined. You've been through significant trauma." "My son first." The paramedic hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. This way." They guided Marcus toward one of the ambulances, where another medical team was waiting. Jalen refused to be separated, so they examined him while he sat in his father's lap, checking his heartbeat, his blood pressure shining lights in his eyes. "He seems okay," the paramedic said, "but given his medical history, we should transport him to the hospital for observation." "His medical history?" Marcus frowned. How do you know about his medical history? The airline pulled the passenger manifest. They flagged his condition. Of course they did. In the aftermath of a crisis, every detail became important. Every passenger became a data point. Daddy, Jalen tugged at his sleeve. Are we going to the hospital? Just for a checkup, buddy, to make sure you're okay. But I feel fine. I know, but the doctors want to be extra careful. That's their job. Jalen considered this. Like how it was your job to fly the plane? Marcus smiled, despite everything. Something like that. The doors of the ambulance were still open, and through them, Marcus could see the other passengers being led across the tarmac. Some were walking on their own, supported by airline personnel. Others were being carried on stretchers. All of them wore the same expression of stunned disbelief. Then, he saw her. Vivian Ashford was standing alone, slightly apart from the other passengers. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled. Her perfect hair had come undone. Her face, without its mask of corporate confidence, looked older, somehow more human. She was staring directly at him. Their eyes met across the chaos of the tarmac. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, Vivian started walking toward the ambulance. Marcus felt his body tense. He didn't know what to expect. Another cutting remark. A defensive justification. Some attempt to reframe her earlier cruelty as something other than what it was. Vivian stopped a few feet away. Up close, Marcus could see the tear tracks cutting through her ruined makeup, the trembling in her hands that she couldn't quite control. "Mr. Webb," she said. Her voice was hoarse, stripped of its earlier authority. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." The words came out harder than Marcus intended, but he didn't take them back. He was too tired for diplomacy, too drained for the social niceties that usually smoothed over awkward moments. Vivian flinched as if he had struck her. "I deserve that." "Yes, you do. What I said earlier on the plane, it was unforgivable." "It was. I looked at you and I saw—" She stopped, struggling. "I saw what I wanted to see. What was easy to see. I didn't look any deeper." Marcus said nothing. He just held his son closer. "I've spent my entire career judging people," Vivian continued. "Categorizing them. Deciding who was worth my time and who wasn't. It's how I built my company. It's how I built my life." She laughed bitterly. "And today I learned that everything I thought I knew about people was wrong." "Is that supposed to be an apology?" "I don't know what it is. She took a shaky breath. "I just needed you to know that I see you now. I see who you really are. And I'm ashamed of who I was when I didn't." Marcus studied her face, looking for the calculation, the angle, the ulterior motive. That was what people like Vivian Ashford did, wasn't it? Everything was a transaction. Every interaction was a negotiation. But all he saw was a broken woman standing in the wreckage of her own assumptions. "My wife used to say something," Marcus said slowly. "She used to say that everyone is fighting a battle you can't see, that the janitor might be a hero, that the CEO might be a coward, that you never really know what someone is made of until the moment they have to choose." Vivian's eyes filled with fresh tears. "And what am I made of?" "I don't know. That's not for me to decide. That's for you." "How do I even begin to?" "You start by being different. Not just saying you're different. Actually being different. Every day. Every choice. Until the person you want to be becomes the person you are." Vivian nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "Is that what you did after you left the military?" Marcus glanced down at Jalen, who had fallen asleep against his chest, exhausted by the ordeal. "I had help. I had a reason to keep going even when I wanted to give up." "Your son." "My son. My wife before she passed. The memory of who I was supposed to be." He looked back at Vivian. "Find your reason. The rest will follow." A paramedic approached, breaking the moment. "Mr. Webb, we really need to transport your son now. The hospital has been notified." Marcus nodded. "I understand." He stood carefully adjusting Jalen's sleeping form in his arms. Before he stepped into the ambulance, he turned back to Vivian one last time. "Ms. Ashford." "Yes." "For what it's worth, I forgive you." Her face crumpled. "Why? After what I said, after how I treated you. Why would you forgive me?" "Because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. My wife taught me that too." He paused. "And because my son was watching. He sees everything I do. I want him to see a man who forgives, not a man who holds grudges." He climbed into the ambulance. The doors closed. And Vivian Ashford stood alone on the tarmac, watching the vehicle pull away, feeling something shift inside her that she couldn't name. The ride to the hospital was quiet. Jalen slept through most of it. His small body curled against his father's side, one hand still clutching the Model F-18. Marcus stared out the window, watching the Colorado landscape scroll past, trying to process everything that had happened. 4 hours ago, he had been a janitor. Invisible. Forgettable. A man defined by his circumstances rather than his capabilities. Now he was... what? A hero. The word felt strange, uncomfortable. He hadn't done anything heroic. He had simply done what needed to be done. Used skills that he had spent years acquiring, skills that he had thought were useless in his new life. Maybe they weren't useless after all. Maybe nothing was ever truly wasted. The ambulance arrived at Memorial Hospital, Colorado Springs. Jalen was whisked away for examination, and Marcus was finally forced to separate from his son, long enough for his own medical evaluation. "Your vitals are remarkably stable," the attending physician said, shaking her head in amazement. "Considering what you just went through, I would have expected elevated blood pressure, tachycardia, signs of acute stress response. But you're almost completely normal." "Training," Marcus said simply. "I spent 15 years learning to stay calm under pressure." 15 years of what exactly?" "I was a fighter pilot, Navy." The doctor's eyebrows rose. "That explains a lot." She made a note on her tablet. "I'm going to recommend observation for a few hours just to be safe. Is there anyone we should contact, family?" Marcus shook his head. "Just my son. He's all I have." "What about the boy's mother?" "She passed away 3 years ago." The doctor's expression softened. "I'm sorry, that must be difficult." "It is, but we manage." "Mr. Webb," the doctor hesitated. "I don't know if anyone has told you this yet, but what you did today was extraordinary. I've been in emergency medicine for 20 years. I've seen a lot of trauma, a lot of crisis situations, but I've never heard of a passenger landing a commercial aircraft. You saved 200 lives. I saved my son. Everyone else was just along for the ride." The doctor smiled. "That's a very humble way of looking at it." "It's the only way I know how to look at it." She nodded and left him alone in the examination room. Marcus lay back on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. The adrenaline was fading now, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. He closed his eyes and let himself drift. Elena's face appeared in his mind, as clear as if she were standing beside him. "You did good today, baby." "I almost didn't make it." "But you did. You always do." "I miss you so much." "I know. I miss you too. But you're not alone, Marcus. You never were." He must have slept, because when he opened his eyes, the light in the room had changed, and there was someone sitting in the chair beside his bed. Thomas Chen, the man from the plane, the man with 2 daughters at home. "I hope I'm not intruding," Thomas said quietly. "The nurses said you were resting, but I needed to see you." Marcus sat up slowly, his muscles protesting. "How did you find me?" "I asked. A lot of people are asking about you, actually. The media is going crazy. There are reporters camped outside the hospital. Reporters. You're famous, Mr. Webb, or you will be as soon as they figure out who you are. Marcus groaned. That's the last thing I want. I figured as much. Thomas leaned forward. That's why I came. To warn you, and to thank you. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You saved my life. You saved the lives of 200 people. But more than that. Thomas's voice cracked. You saved me for my daughters, Emma and Sophie. They already lost their mother. If they had lost me too. They didn't. That's what matters. Because of you. Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. I'm not a wealthy man, not like some of the people on that plane, but I'm a lawyer. Estate planning mostly. If there's ever anything I can do for you, anything at all, please call me. Marcus took the card, turned it over in his hands. Thank you. Your son Jalen. He talked about you the whole time you were in the cockpit. He told me you used to fly jets. He told me you gave it all up to take care of him. Thomas paused. He's very proud of you. He shouldn't be proud of me for this. I just did what I had to do. That's exactly why he should be proud. Because when the moment came when everyone else was frozen with fear, you stood up. You acted. You didn't wait for someone else to save the day. Thomas stood. That's what heroes do, Mr. Webb. They don't wait. They act. He extended his hand. Marcus shook it. Take care of yourself, Thomas said. And take care of that boy. He's something special. I know he is. Thomas left, and Marcus was alone again. But not for long. Over the next several hours, a stream of visitors came through his room. Passengers from the flight wanting to thank him. Hospital staff wanting to meet the man who had done the impossible. Airline officials wanting to take his statement. And finally, inevitably, the media. A hospital administrator knocked on his door, looking apologetic. Mr. Webb, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a situation. The press has discovered who you are. They're requesting an interview. No. I understand your reluctance, but... I said no, I'm not interested in being on television. The administrator shifted uncomfortably. The airline is offering to compensate you for your time, generously. I don't care about compensation. I care about my son's privacy. I care about getting back to our lives. Mr. Webb, with respect, your lives are never going to be the same. What you did today, it's already gone viral. Your picture is on every news network. Your name is trending on social media. You can't put this genie back in the bottle. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He hadn't thought about that, hadn't considered the implications beyond the immediate crisis. What do they know about me? He asked quietly. They know your name. They know you were a passenger in economy class. They know you're a former military pilot. The administrator paused. And they know you work as a janitor. That's the part that's getting the most attention. Why? Because it's a story, Mr. Webb. A narrative. The invisible man who saves the day. The janitor who turns out to be a hero. The media loves that kind of thing. Marcus closed his eyes. I need to see my son. He's still being examined, but I can take you to him. Please. They found Jalen in the pediatric wing, sitting up in bed, chatting happily with a young nurse who was clearly charmed by him. The boy's face lit up when he saw his father. Daddy? They said my heart is doing good. The doctor said I'm strong like a superhero. Marcus rushed to his son's bedside, gathering him in his arms. That's because you are a superhero, buddy. No, you're the superhero. You flew the plane. Everyone's talking about it. A lady came and asked me questions about you. Marcus felt his blood run cold. What lady? She said she was from the news. She wanted to know if you really cleaned buildings at night. What did you tell her? Jalen looked confused by his father's tone. I told her yes. Was that wrong? Marcus forced himself to relax. It wasn't Jalen's fault. He was 8 years old. He didn't understand the implications. No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't expecting people to ask about our lives. She said you're a hero. She said you saved everyone. I just did what I had to do. That's what heroes do, Daddy. They do what they have to do. Marcus hugged his son tighter, marveling at the wisdom that sometimes came from children. The same words Thomas Chen had spoken, now echoed by an 8-year-old boy. Maybe they were both right. Maybe heroism wasn't about grand gestures or seeking recognition. Maybe it was simply about showing up, doing the work, being there when you were needed. The door opened, and the hospital administrator reappeared. Mr. Webb, I'm sorry, but the situation is escalating. There's someone here who insists on seeing you. Wayne? Who? Before the administrator could answer, a figure pushed past him into the room. Captain David Morrison, pale, exhausted, wearing a hospital gown, but very much alive. Mr. Webb. His voice was weak, but determined. I had to see you. Had to thank you in person. Marcus stood. Captain, you should be resting. I'll rest when I'm dead, which thanks to you is not going to be today. Morrison crossed the room, ignoring the protests of the nurse who had followed him. I've been flying for 30 years. 30 years! And what you did in that cockpit, I've never seen anything like it. I just used the training I had. You used skills that most civilian pilots don't even know exist. Differential thrust landing, I've read about it in technical journals. Never thought I'd see it done for real. It was the only option. That's my point. Most people in that situation wouldn't have known there was an option. They would have frozen, panicked, given up. Morrison placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You didn't. You assessed the situation, identified a solution, and executed it flawlessly, under conditions that would have broken most pilots. I was scared, Marcus admitted. The whole time. I was terrified. Of course you were. Only a fool wouldn't be scared. But you didn't let the fear control you. That's the difference between a pilot and a passenger, Mr. Webb. Pilots feel fear. They just don't let it fly the plane. Marcus didn't know what to say. The airline wants to hire you, Morrison continued. They haven't officially announced it yet, but I've been talking to management. They want you as a pilot instructor, training others to handle emergency situations. I can't. I have responsibilities. My son needs surgery. I work 2 jobs just to keep up with the medical bills. I know. They know. They're prepared to make you an offer that addresses all of that. Morrison smiled weakly. You're not just a hero, Mr. Webb. You're an asset, a valuable one. And smart companies know how to value their assets. Before Marcus could respond, another commotion erupted at the door. I demand to see him immediately. Vivian Ashford pushed her way into the room, followed by a harried-looking hospital security guard. Ma'am, you can't just... I can and I will. Vivian's voice had regained some of its former authority, but there was something different beneath it now. Something softer. Mr. Webb, I apologize for the intrusion, but there's something I need to tell you. Something that can't wait. Marcus braced himself for whatever was coming. I made some calls, Vivian said. After we spoke on the tarmac, I made some calls to people I know, people with resources. Ms. Ashford, I already told you. Please let me finish. She took a deep breath. I learned about your situation, your wife, your son's condition, the medical bills, the consulting job in Los Angeles that was supposed to help pay for his surgery. How do you know about that? I have resources, Mr. Webb. I used them. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is a check. It's made out to the hospital in Los Angeles where your son was supposed to have his consultation. It covers the full cost of his surgery plus any related expenses, plus a fund for his ongoing care. Marcus stared at the envelope. I can't accept that. You can and you will. Vivian's voice broke. Mr. Webb, I have spent my entire life acquiring money, millions of dollars, hundreds of millions, and today I realized that I was willing to give every single penny of it just to live. just to survive, just to have another day on this earth. She pressed the envelope into his hands. This money is nothing to me, but it could be everything to your son. Please, let me do this one good thing. Marcus looked at the envelope, then at his son, then at the woman who had insulted him just hours ago. This doesn't make up for what you said. I know. Nothing ever will. But I'm not doing this to make up for anything. I'm doing this because it's right. Because your son deserves a chance. Because... She faltered. Because I want to be different. Like you said, actually different. And this is where I start. Jalen, who had been watching this exchange with wide eyes, spoke up. Daddy is the lady giving us money. She wants to buddy. For my heart surgery. Yes. Jalen looked at Vivian with the uncomplicated directness that only children possess. Thank you, lady. My heart makes me tired sometimes. The doctors say a new surgery will help. Vivian knelt down to Jalen's level, her designer clothes touching the hospital floor without hesitation. You're welcome, sweetheart. And I'm sorry I was mean to you and your daddy earlier. I was wrong. Very wrong. It's okay, Jalen said. Daddy says people sometimes say mean things when they're scared. Were you scared? Vivian smiled through her tears. Yes, honey, I was very scared. But your daddy saved us. He saved everyone. I know. He's the best daddy in the whole world. Vivian looked up at Marcus, and in that moment, all the barriers between them dissolved. He is, she agreed. He really is. Marcus stood in the hospital room, holding an envelope that represented the answer to every financial worry that had plagued him for years. Around him were people whose lives he had saved, whose perspectives he had changed, whose assumptions he had shattered. And beside him was his son, alive and safe and smiling. This morning he had been invisible. Tonight he was seen. And for the first time in a very long time, Marcus Webb felt like the man his wife had always believed him to be. The hospital room had grown quiet. Captain Morrison had been wheeled back to his own room by insistent nurses. The security guard had retreated to the hallway. Even Vivian Ashford had finally left, after pressing the envelope firmly into Marcus's hands and making him promise to accept the gift. Now it was just Marcus and Jalen, father and son, alone in the fluorescent glow of the pediatric wing. Daddy. Marcus looked down at his boy. Yeah, buddy. Are we going to be okay now? It was such a simple question, such a profound one. Marcus thought about everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. The flight, the failure, the fear, the moment he had stood up from seat 28A and walked toward a destiny he had spent 4 years trying to escape. Yeah, buddy, he said softly. I think we're going to be okay. Because the lady gave us money. Partly. But mostly because we have each other. That's what really matters. Jalen nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. Then his face brightened. Daddy, can I tell you a secret? Always. When you were flying the plane, I wasn't really scared. I mean, I was a little scared, but mostly I was proud. Because I knew you could do it. I knew you would save us. Marcus felt his eyes burn. How did you know that? Because you're my daddy. And you always keep your promises. Marcus pulled his son close, burying his face in the boy's hair, breathing in the scent that had kept him going through every long night, every exhausting shift, every moment of doubt and despair. I love you, Jalen. I love you too, Daddy. To the moon and back. To the moon and back. They held each other for a long time, the silence between them full of everything words couldn't express. The next morning brought chaos of a different kind. The hospital lobby was packed with reporters, cameras, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Marcus stood at the window of Jalen's room, watching the circus below, feeling a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. Mr. Webb. He turned. A hospital administrator stood in the doorway looking apologetic. The airline has sent representatives. They're asking to meet with you. They say it's important. Important how? They wouldn't say, but they were very insistent. Marcus glanced at Jalen, who was eating breakfast and watching cartoons, seemingly oblivious to the storm swirling around them. "Can someone stay with my son?" "Of course. I'll arrange it personally." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in a conference room on the hospital's administrative floor. 3 people sat across from him. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. A younger man in a suit that probably cost more than Marcus earned in a month, and a third figure who made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. Admiral James Patterson. Retired. Former commander of Naval Air Forces Atlantic. The man who had pinned Marcus's wings on his chest 15 years ago. "Major Webb," Patterson said, rising to shake his hand. "Or should I say Mr. Webb now?" "Admiral, I didn't expect to see you here. When I heard what happened, I got on the first flight out of Norfolk." Patterson's grip was firm, his eyes bright with something that looked like pride. "You did good yesterday, Ghost. Real good." "I did what I had to do." "That's what you always said, even when you were pulling off maneuvers that made your instructor's hair turn white." Patterson gestured toward the chairs. "Sit down. We have a lot to discuss." The woman introduced herself as Catherine Wells, Executive Vice President of United Airlines. The man was David Foster, head of their legal department. "Mr. Webb," Catherine began, "I'm sure you understand that what happened yesterday was unprecedented. In the entire history of commercial aviation, there has never been a case quite like this." "I'm not looking for recognition," Marcus said. "I just want to go home with my son. We understand, and we respect that." She folded her hands on the table. "But the reality is, your actions have already become public knowledge. Your name, your background, your current profession, all of it is now part of the national conversation. I've noticed. What you may not have noticed is the response. Mr. Webb, you've become a symbol, a janitor who turns out to be a hero, a single father who sacrifices everything for his child, then rises to save 200 lives. Your story has resonated with people in a way that transcends typical news cycles." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not a symbol. I'm just a man trying to take care of his son." "That's exactly why you're a symbol." Admiral Patterson leaned forward. "Marcus, I've known you for 20 years. I watched you become one of the finest pilots to ever fly for the United States Navy. I also watched you walk away from all of it when your wife got sick. No bitterness, no complaints, just quiet duty redirected to a different mission. My family needed me. And yesterday, 200 families needed you. That's who you are. That's who you've always been." Catherine Wells cleared her throat. "Mr. Webb, United Airlines would like to offer you a position, Chief Training Officer for Emergency Flight Operations. You would be responsible for developing and implementing training programs based on the techniques you used yesterday. The salary would be substantial," David Foster added, "along with full benefits including comprehensive medical coverage for your son." Marcus stared at them. "You want to hire me, the janitor?" "We want to hire Major Marcus Webb, decorated combat veteran and the only person in history to successfully land a commercial aircraft using differential thrust under catastrophic hydraulic failure." Catherine smiled. "The janitor part just makes the story better. I haven't flown professionally in 4 years. Your skills haven't diminished. Yesterday proved that." Admiral Patterson pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I've also been authorized to inform you that the Navy is prepared to reinstate your status as a reserve officer should you choose to accept. There's a training program at Oceana that could use someone with your experience." Marcus's head was spinning. 24 hours ago, he had been mopping floors and emptying trash cans. Now he was being offered his life back. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." Catherine slid a business card across the table. "But don't take too long. The media attention will fade eventually, and we'd like to make the announcement while your story is still fresh." Marcus took the card, turning it over in his hands. "There's something you should know. A passenger on the flight, Vivian Ashford, she offered to pay for my son's surgery. I haven't decided whether to accept. We're aware of Ms. Ashford's offer, Catherine said, and we support it fully. But we'd also like to contribute. United Airlines is establishing a medical fund in your name to cover any expenses not already addressed by Ms. Ashford's generosity. Why? Because you saved our passengers, Mr. Webb. You saved our crew. You saved our aircraft. And you saved our reputation. She paused. The least we can do is save your son. Marcus felt something crack inside him. The wall he had built over 4 years of struggle, 4 years of silent sacrifice, 4 years of pretending that everything was fine when nothing was fine. The wall crumbled, and for the first time since Elena's funeral, Marcus Webb allowed himself to hope. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you." The news conference was held that afternoon in the hospital's main auditorium. Marcus had tried to refuse, but Catherine Wells had gently explained that public acknowledgement was necessary for closure, both for the passengers and for the airline. So he sat at a table facing a room full of reporters, cameras flashing microphones pointed at him like accusatory fingers. Catherine spoke first, providing the official account of what had happened, the technical details, the sequence of failures, the miraculous landing. Then it was Marcus's turn. "Mr. Webb, how does it feel to be called a hero?" Marcus leaned toward the microphone. "I don't think of myself as a hero. I think of myself as a father who did what he had to do to get home to his son." "But you saved 200 lives." "I saved my son. Everyone else was just fortunate enough to be on the same plane." A ripple of appreciative laughter moved through the room. "Mr. Webb, we've learned that you left the Navy to care for your wife during her cancer treatment, and that you've been working as a janitor and security guard to pay for your son's medical bills. Can you comment on that?" Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. "My wife was the love of my life. When she got sick, there was no question about what I would do. I would be there for her, whatever it took." He paused. "After she passed, I had a choice. I could wallow in grief, or I could honor her memory by being the best father I could be to our son. I chose the second option. Even if it meant giving up your career. Careers can be rebuilt. Children cannot. My son needed stability. He needed presence. He needed a father who was there, not a father who was deployed halfway around the world. Do you regret leaving the military?" "Not for a second. The years I spent with my wife before she died, the years I've spent with my son since, those are the most valuable years of my life. I wouldn't trade them for anything." "Mr. Webb, we understand that you've been offered a position with the airline. Will you accept?" Marcus glanced at Catherine Wells, then back at the cameras. "I'm considering all my options. But whatever I decide, my priority remains the same, my son. Everything else is secondary." "One last question, Mr. Webb. What would you like people to take away from your story?" Marcus thought about this for a long moment. The room fell silent, waiting. "I would like people to understand that heroism isn't about grand gestures or seeking recognition. It's about showing up. It's about doing the right thing even when it's hard, even when no one is watching, even when you're terrified." He paused, his voice growing stronger. "I would also like people to understand that the person sitting next to them on a plane, or standing behind them in line, or mopping the floor in their office building, that person has a story. They have struggles. They have capabilities that you can't see just by looking at them." His eyes found the camera, speaking directly to the millions who would eventually watch this moment. "Don't judge people by their appearance. Don't dismiss them because of their job or their clothes or their circumstances. You never know who might save your life someday. You never know who the hero might be." The room erupted in applause. Marcus barely heard it. He was already thinking about Jalen waiting for him upstairs, probably wondering what was taking so long. 3 days later, Marcus and Jalen flew to Los Angeles. First class this time, courtesy of United Airlines. Jalen couldn't stop grinning, pressing his face to the window, marveling at the clouds below. "Daddy, is this how it felt when you used to fly jets?" "A little bit, but jets go much faster. And higher." Higher than the clouds. Much higher, so high that the sky turns black and you can see the curve of the earth. Jalen's eyes went wide. That's so cool. It is. Maybe someday I'll take you up there. Promise. Marcus smiled. Promise. The consultation with Dr. Reeves at Cedars-Sinai went better than expected. Jalen's heart condition was serious but treatable. The surgery would be complex but had a high success rate. With proper care and follow-up, there was no reason Jalen couldn't live a completely normal life. He's a strong boy, Dr. Reeves said after Jalen had been taken for preliminary tests. His cardiovascular function is actually better than I expected given his history. Whatever you've been doing, Mr. Webb, keep doing it. I've just been trying to give him a good life. It shows. Children are resilient, but they need stability. They need love. They need a parent who puts them first. Dr. Reeves smiled. Jalen has all of that. It makes my job much easier. The surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Marcus and Jalen stayed in Los Angeles, courtesy of Vivian Ashford, who had arranged accommodations at a hotel near the hospital. They visited the ocean, fulfilling the promise Marcus had made when he first booked the flight that had changed everything. They stood on the Santa Monica Pier, watching the waves crash against the shore, feeling the salt spray on their faces. It's so big, Jalen whispered. It is. Bigger than I imagined. Most things are buddy. The world is full of things that are bigger and more beautiful than we can imagine. You just have to be brave enough to go find them. Jalen reached for his father's hand. Daddy, can I ask you something? Anything. When you were flying the plane when everything was going wrong, were you thinking about Mommy? Marcus felt his throat tighten. Yes, I was. What were you thinking? I was thinking about how much she loved us, how much she wanted us to be happy, how much she would want me to fight to come home to you. Do you think she was watching? Marcus looked out at the endless expanse of the Pacific, at the sunlight dancing on the water, at the seabirds wheeling overhead. Yeah, buddy, I think she was watching. I think she's always watching. That makes me happy, Jalen said. I like thinking that Mommy is watching over us. Me too. They stood there for a long time, father and son watching the ocean and remembering the woman who had loved them both. The surgery was a success. Marcus sat in the recovery room holding Jalen's hand, watching his son's chest rise and fall with each breath. The doctors had said everything went perfectly. The damaged valve had been repaired. Jalen's heart was strong. Their journey wasn't over. There would be months of recovery, years of follow-up appointments, a lifetime of careful monitoring. But the worst was behind them. When Jalen finally opened his eyes, the first thing he said was, "Daddy, did the doctors fix my heart?" "They did, buddy. They fixed it." "Does this mean I can run now, like the other kids?" Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. "Yeah, buddy. You can run. You can run as fast as you want." Jalen smiled, his eyes already drooping closed again. "Good. I want to run. I want to run so fast." "You will, buddy. You will." 6 months later, Marcus Webb stood at the front of a training room at United Airlines' Denver facility. 20 pilot candidates sat before him, notebooks open, expressions eager. "Good morning," Marcus said. "My name is Marcus Webb. Some of you may have heard of me." A few knowing smiles. A few nervous laughs. "Over the next 8 weeks, I'm going to teach you things that aren't in any textbook. Techniques that could save your life and the lives of your passengers if everything goes wrong." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But before we begin, I want to tell you something about myself. Something that the news stories didn't cover." He walked to the window, looking out at the runway where aircraft were taking off and landing, a ballet of precision and power. 6 months ago, I was a janitor. I cleaned offices at night. I worked security at a mall on weekends. I took any job I could find because my son needed surgery and I needed to pay for it. He turned back to face his students. Some of you might think that's a step down from being a Navy fighter pilot. Some of you might wonder how a man goes from flying combat missions to mopping floors. He walked back to the front of the room, his eyes moving from face to face. The answer is simple: love. I gave up my career because the people I loved needed me more than the sky did, and I would make that choice again every single time, without hesitation. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. That's the first lesson I want to teach you. Being a pilot isn't about the uniform. It isn't about the salary. It isn't about the prestige. Being a pilot is about responsibility. It's about the 200 souls sitting behind you, trusting you with their lives. He straightened his voice, rising. When I landed that plane in Colorado Springs, I wasn't thinking about glory. I wasn't thinking about recognition. I was thinking about my son, sitting in seat 28A, waiting for me to keep my promise to bring him home safe. He paused, letting the moment breathe. Every passenger on your aircraft is someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's mother or father or husband or wife. They are trusting you to take them where they need to go and to bring them back to the people who love them. He looked at each of his students in turn. That is the weight of this job. That is the privilege of this profession. And that is what I'm going to teach you to honor. The room was silent. Then slowly, one student began to clap. Then another. Then another. Until the entire room was applauding not for the hero of Flight 1142, but for the man standing before them who had reminded them why they wanted to fly in the first place. Marcus let the applause wash over him, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Outside the facility in the parking lot, a familiar car was waiting. Jalen sat in the back seat, his nose pressed to the window, watching his father emerge from the building. "Daddy." Marcus opened the door, and Jalen tumbled out, throwing himself into his father's arms. "How was your first day?" "It was good, buddy. Really good." "Did you teach them how to fly?" "I started to. It takes a while to learn everything. Like how it takes me a while to learn math." Marcus laughed. "Exactly like that." They climbed into the car together, Marcus in the driver's seat, Jalen beside him. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Jalen reached into his backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. "I made this for you, at school." It was a drawing, crude, childlike, but unmistakable. An airplane surrounded by clouds. A figure in the cockpit clearly meant to be Marcus. And next to the plane, watching from above, a woman with wings. "That's Mommy," Jalen said, pointing to the winged figure. "She's watching you fly. She's making sure you're safe." Marcus stared at the drawing, unable to speak. "Do you like it?" He pulled his son close, hugging him tightly across the center console. "I love it, buddy. I love it so much." "I knew you would." Jalen smiled. "Because Mommy always said you were born to fly. And now you're flying again. And she's happy." Marcus wiped his eyes and tucked the drawing carefully into his shirt pocket, against his heart. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think she is." They drove home together, father and son, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Behind them was a year of struggle, sacrifice, and survival. Ahead of them was a future bright with possibility. Marcus thought about everything that had brought them here. The loss of Elena. The desperate years of working 2 jobs. The moment on the plane when he had heard the captain's impossible question and made the choice to stand up. He thought about Vivian Ashford, who had reached out just last week to tell him that she had started a foundation supporting single parents in crisis. She had resigned from her CEO position to run it full-time. "You showed me who I could be," she had said. "Now I'm trying to live up to that." He thought about Captain Morrison, who had recovered fully and returned to flying, and who sent Marcus a text every morning, "Clear skies, ghost." He thought about Thomas Chen, whose daughters had sent Jalen a care package after his surgery stuffed with toys and candy, and a handwritten card that said, "Thank you for sharing your daddy with us." And he thought about Elena, his wife, his love, his North Star. "You were right," he whispered, too soft for Jalen to hear. "I am still flying. Just a different kind of flight." They pulled into the driveway of their small house. Jalen bounded out of the car and ran toward the front door. His legs strong, his heart healed, his future unlimited. Marcus watched him go, his chest swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. He had been invisible once, a number in a seat, a uniform that people looked through without seeing. But he had never stopped being who he was. A pilot, a father, a protector, a man who stood up when standing up mattered most. And that in the end was enough. More than enough. Marcus Webb walked into his home, closed the door behind him, and started cooking dinner for his son. The seat never defined the man. The uniform never revealed the warrior. And the ones who rise when everything falls apart are the ones who understood all along that true courage was never about the absence of fear. It was about loving something so much that fear became irrelevant. Marcus Webb loved his son. And that love had moved mountains, landed planes, and changed the world, one quiet act of heroism at a time.